This video is sponsored by Knuckles OX and Baba Snake. Some time has passed since the battle with Metal SKT 2.0, though this is not to say all is back as it should be, as even after ousting the Eggman Empire, much of the world is still in shambles, with it falling to Team Guardian and aiming to fix it. Presently, they are located in Station Square, as due to being one of the closest locations to Angel Island, it is as good a place as any to start a concerted effort, while also being one of the most logical places for fragments of the Master Emerald to turn up. So far, they have managed to find a couple, with this delighting the brothers to no end. And while Knuckles in particular feels a special relief as it was his actions that caused the sacred gem to be shattered, Sonic is even more pleased, as his instincts tell him that these fragments will allow him to go hyper again. While this desire is mostly altruistic, as the ability to fly along with a speed that surpasses his regular boost will make it far easier to save people and clean up messes the extra left in his wake. There is also a selfish component, as Sonic simply loves going fast, to the point that even when they take a break for the day, he is loath to revert to normal, instead staying hyper, so that he can go goof off. Or in the cases where Knuckles or Tails press the issue, he waits until they are asleep before adapting that lighter blue glow and zipping off anyway. Truthfully, these excursions are not entirely unhelpful, as just by continually channeling chaos energy so frequently, he is naturally going to get better at regulating it and maintaining the form, meaning he's also inadvertently working towards a sort of mastery, so Knucks and Tails can't get that mad at him. Though speaking of, not everyone is so convinced, as Knuckles in particular has his concerns, since not only is this hyper form still largely untested, meaning there's no way of knowing whether there are negative side effects to prolonged usage of the transformation, but also, it makes Sonic's more obnoxious and headstrong traits be brought to the forefront, as he is becoming more willful, often taking off on his own during cleanup missions or emerald hunts, while more and more often mentioning his victory over Metal SKT, rather than their victory. Growing rather fed up with this, and feeling his little brother needs a reality check, Knuckles confronts Sonic one evening when the Blue Blur thinks he and Tails are asleep, and so is caught in the process blue-handed, powering up for another night of juicing and jamming. In his big brotherly way, the Echidna initially attempts to lay out his concerns, though unsurprisingly, Sonic just views this as Knucks being a worrywart. He's been so much sappier and overprotective since they got back from Little Planet, and so Sonic tries to shrug him off. However, here Knuckles won't budge, insisting that Sonic take a break from Hyper for his own good, and even going so far as to sternly try and take the Emerald Shards from him, when he refuses petulantly. Due to being faster, and in this state, stronger, Sonic is easily able to maintain his hold on most of the pieces, with Knuckles only getting his hands on one. Though this is all he needs, as adopting an expression of deep, almost meditative focus, the Red Ruffian taps into both his ancestral tie with the jewel, and a burning desire to not be outdone by his younger brother. The Echidna warrior enters his own pink hyper form. This reveals enough to earn an audible "whoa" from the Hedgehog, as he had not anticipated Knuckles being able to do this, though fixing the younger boy with a slight smirk. The now pink pugilist asks if Sonic really thought he and Tails haven't been training since the last battle, or is he just so wrapped up in his own ego right now that he isn't even thinking about them at all anymore? A little stung by this accusation, Sonic sees that while it's way past cool that Knucks can go hyper too, he's still the original and the fastest, so unless the big guy wants to race him, they can continue this conversation in the morning. With this cheeky remark, the Blue Blur is off. The Blue Blur is off, tearing through the concrete jungle of the city with as much ease as he did the ancient one during his time displacement. Though to his surprise, as he rounds a corner flanked by a pair of skyscrapers, the road in front of him suddenly erupts as Hyper Knuckles bursts out, and scowls that this is the problem right here. Sonic overestimates his own abilities and underestimates theirs, since he's forgotten the power he had during that battle against Metal SKT was the result of him and Tails backing him up. So on his own, he's only 1/3 as strong and fast as he thinks he is, somewhere between annoyed at being berated and elated at a chance to play what is effectively tag with his big bro. Sonic teasingly tells Knucklehead to prove it then, before zipping off once more the opposite direction. Though to his surprise, the Echidna simply does, popping up again and scolding that Sonic has way more energy to draw from with all those shards. But since he's gotten complacent, sloppy, and slacked off in his training, he's only able to draw out the same amount of power that the Red Guardian can with one. In an attempt to prove this point, Knuckles then bursts from his hole and attempts to land a glide punch on his younger brother. Though reacting with equal speed, Sonic spin dashes into him, countering the hit and sending Knucks skyward. But this is not the definitive blow Sonic thinks it is, as activating his Chaos Shield, the older Guardian is able to rapidly expand it, so that it slams into the Blue Guardian instead, and knocks him back into a parked car. Now with one good hit in each, the brothers feel their blood beginning to pump with that familiar feeling of battle. Though before this can devolve from a spar or sibling tussle into something more violent, a bolt of electricity strikes the ground between them, as Tails flies into view, having evidently heard the pair bickering and followed, albeit at a slower pace, as he is without any emerald shards, and is not in his hyper state, having not yet awakened it independently. In a measured tone, the Fox Boy urges his brothers to break it up, since fighting won't get them anywhere, and in fact since his tearing up the city is counterproductive, a claim that earns him matching huffs from Sonic and Knuckles. Though all the same, he remains resolute, just as his brothers taught him, suggesting that what they all need most right now is some time apart to cool down and reflect on things. After all, a lot has happened since they were separated on Little Planet, and whether they realize it or not, none of them were the same people they were back then. But with everything being so hectic, they haven't really had time to sit down and consider who they are now, which is something they all need to do if they want to keep their bond strong and involve their synchronicity, rather than just falling back on old roles that may no longer be applicable. Sighing a little, Knuckles admits that Tails is right, proudly calling this a very mature assessment. While smirking, Sonic grins that once again their little bro is showing why he ought to be their leader. Modestly, the Yellow Guardian retorts that he's just trying to do what's best for all of them in the mission at hand, since they can also cover more ground this way, with both Sonic and Knuckles nodding and promising to meet up once they've recovered the rest of the Master Emerald shards and done some thinking. Then as one, they each wish each other luck and go their separate ways. Due to his brothers making inroads to leave Station Square, Sonic decides to stick around, both because there's still some work to be done here, and because he's not the most reflective of hedgehogs. So it'd be good to get Amy's input on Tails' whole question of who he is, since she's much better at that sort of stuff, and it's an excuse to go spend time with her. Making his way downtown towards her apartment, Sonic is surprised to see that he is not the only one out and about, as despite the lateness of the hour, it seems something has the police pretty riled up, as several squad cars go speeding past him towards City Hall. Figuring he should investigate, the Blue Blur gives chase, with his instincts proving right, as when he arrives, he sees some sort of water creature menacing the police, who are in the process of fleeing, having found their guns to be useless. Grinning that this will let him get out that leftover energy from when Tails interrupted his scrap with Knux, and allow him to cool his jets just like his bros won at the same time, Sonic goes on the attack, dashing forward and splattering the moist monster into a puddle. However, showing incredible resilience and regenerative powers, the creature simply reforms and begins spinning while stretching its arms, so that Sonic is caught in the gut and sent tumbling back. Nonetheless, the Blue Blur isn't worried, as turning that momentum into speed, he bounces back and effortlessly splatters his foe once again. Unlike before, the creature does not reconstitute itself this time, instead choosing to flee down a nearby sewer grate. While flashing a grin, the rambunctious hedgehog grins that he wouldn't want to fight the one and only way past cool Hypersonic either, though ironically, in saying that, he uses up the last of his own energy and reverts to normal, with this being the first time he's been forced to drop out of the form. Maybe there is something to Knux' worrying after all, though that's tomorrow's problem. Right now, he needs a nap and maybe a couple chili dogs, since he's feeling beat all of a sudden. Luckily, Amy's place isn't too far from here, with the pink hedgehog hurrying him inside when she sees him, all the while asking if he's okay, since she's never seen him so low on energy. Blushing a little at this concern, Sonic assures her that he's fine, before recounting the events of tonight, while Amy listens intently. In light of his current condition though, she can't help but agree with Knuckles that overusing his hyperform is a bad idea, with her increased self-confidence in this timeline giving her the courage to say so. Having slowly been coming around to this conclusion as well, Sonic agrees that he'll quit with the transformations for now, though he still needs help finding more Master Emerald shards, as well as figuring out Tails' whole thing about who he is, and apologizing to Knux, he supposes. Nodding, Amy promises to assist him with all these tasks, though it'll have to be in the morning, since right now, the thing he needs most is rest. With the morning comes a new adventure for all three brothers, with Tails is taking him to the Emerald Coast. Being an inquisitive sort, a part of him wonders whether its name is in some way derived from the Master Emerald. Perhaps the people who originally lived here saw the Master Emerald across the water, back when his now fallen home, Angel Island, regularly resided in the sea, and the people of the mainland, which would one day become Station Square, welcomed its green glow as a sign of friendship, naming this coast in its honor. However, even if it is not the case, and the name is coincidental, the Fox Boy still figures that here is as good a place as any to look for more Master Emerald shards, and reflect on who he has become. Ironically, when he looks at his surroundings, he finds it easier to think of who he was, as the coast reminds him a lot of Westside Island, where he was relentlessly bullied, outcast, and shunned, back when he was a fraidy fox who couldn't stand up for himself. Briefly, Tails wonders if he would still be that same coward if he hadn't met Sonic and Knuckles, or whether he would eventually find his courage on his own. Either way, that is one thing he can say that he is now that he was not before. Brave, or at least not a total wuss, though he's still unsure of how that really applies to forming a new and stronger synchronicity with his brothers. Unfortunately, another trait Tails has is his propensity to get lost in thought, with this coming into play here, as he is so preoccupied with his question that he doesn't realize a Master Emerald shard is right in front of him, until he half trips over it. Bending down to pick up the jewel fragment, the flying fox stares deeply into its green prisms, which reflect back an image of him surrounded by sparkles, which almost make him look like he is in the same hyperform Sonic and Knuckles were using last night. That's something else he still has to figure out, since just when he thought he'd stop chasing their backs after returning from the future and fighting alongside Tails' doll, they've gone and pulled that out, so now he has to shape up and catch up in terms of the chaos energy he can put out if he doesn't want to be a liability. And the one other thing he vehemently refuses to be is a helpless baby brother who drags down his comrades. However, it seems that his brothers aren't the only ones Tails needs to catch up to, as in the distance, he sees what looks like a large batnik, far bigger than any he's seen before, even in the Bad Future timeline. Figuring this merits investigation, especially since this presumed badnik appears to be running away from something. Tails takes flight, spinning his propeller tails as he begins pursuing the robot. Up close, it is clear that this is definitely definitely one of Eggman's, which is in and of itself a bad sign, not to mention the fact that it is carrying some sort of tailed frog, as a fellow creature with one more tail than he ought to have. The yellow Brainiac feels an instant affinity for this amphibian, though even if he did not, he would still make it his mission to save the little critter, as he is a guardian, and past experience would suggest that if he does not, he will be forcibly converted into the battery for another evil robot. To this end, when the robot stops running, having apparently reached a place it deems significant, Tails attempts to dive bomb with an attack, thinking this will be easy, as the lumbering bot's sensors haven't even seemed to notice him yet. However, before he can make contact, something strange happens. An orb of reddish light materializes and flies towards the two of them, before suddenly everything is obscured in a flash of even grander light. When Tails' vision returns, he sees that he and the robot are not where they once were, as in place of the Emerald Coast, they are in what appears to be a shrine not dissimilar to the Master Emeralds. In fact, that looks just like the Master Emerald up on the central plinth, though instead of being shattered as Tails so clearly saw, it is whole and glistening. Eagerly, Tails prepares to investigate, though he is stopped when a female voice tells him to watch out for the children. Looking down, Tails sees that he almost stepped on a small winged blue creature, and so bending down to pat it, he apologizes, promising to watch where he steps next time. Laughing fondly, the female voice agrees that their guardian would not have been very happy with him if he had harmed one of the little ones, causing Tails to at last look at her, with it coming as a shock that she is undeniably an echidna. While to most, this would seem impossible, as a veteran time traveler already, not to mention one with a genius level IQ, Tails quickly surmises that he and the Badnik must have been transported into the past. Speaking of, to his surprise, the Eggman robot seems to just be watching the little blue creatures at play, with seemingly no ill intent at all. Perhaps he's never seen people play and have fun together. That's a pretty sad thought, though at least it's not causing trouble as he might have expected. As a result, Tails is free to speak with the echidna, who he learns his name to call, questioning when and where they are, with him learning they are roughly 3,000 years in the past, and on the site of what will one day become mystic ruins. Naturally, this is fascinating to Tails, who begins to ask all sorts of questions about this time, and whether she is the guardian of the Master Emerald, though shockingly, he learns that currently she is the only echidna who knows of this place in the Emerald, while its guardian is a spirit known as Chaos. This almost causes the Fox boy to blurt out something that would reveal he's actually from the future, though thankfully, he's able to catch himself at the last second, so that as the light comes to take him back to his own time, Tikal waves him and the Eggman robot off, smiling that perhaps it is time she shared the secret of this place with the other echidnas. On the topic of echidnas, we pick back up with Knuckles. Like Tails, he had decided to hightail it out of the city, though his reasons are far more pragmatic, as he knows that if he stays, the citizens of Station Square will blame him for any damage caused by his and Sonic's tussle last night, since no matter how hard he tries, it seems people will always associate him with Metal Knuckles as the face of Eggman's oppressive regime, and thus treat him with suspicion or even outright hostility. Needing somewhere far away from such people, the Red Ruffian decides to check out his people's ancient temple mystic ruins, though this is harder to find than he had anticipated, as it is just one temple in a vast jungle. Unfortunately, it seems he will not be able to use his bag of tricks either, as gliding is off the table considering he quite literally cannot see the forest for the trees, and simply going through them and knocking them down would still be a real shame, while digging will get him nowhere as well, as the deep roots make the place even more like a maze than on foot, and tearing through them would cause the same issue to the environment. This just leaves walking, with Knuckles doing quite a lot of it, as every tree in turn looks the same to. Finally, after what feels like hours, the echidna finally emerges, though to his dismay, he has not arrived at his ancestral ruins, but instead, a pond, where a big purple cat is fishing. Bracing himself for more hostility, Knux is instead surprised when the fisherman greets him warmly, asking if he can help him find his best friend. Since this Knuckles is a bit different, and has been influenced by Sonic and Tails to be more laid back, he figures he may as well, since he's not making any headway on his original plan. So the Metacarpo Marsupial agrees to lend a hand, asking what the big guy can tell him about his friend. Smiling appreciative, the cat, who Knuckles learns is aptly named Big, explains that his best friend is a frog named Froggy, and that a bad robot came along and took him away for some reason. Having a feeling who made this bad robot, not to mention being all too familiar with the pain of being torn away from his loved ones, Knux tells Big to come with him to help identify Froggy when they find him, with fate being quick to reward this good deed, as when Big reels in his line to happily get up and go, the echidna spots what looks like to be a Master Emerald fragment on the end of his hook. Spotting the Red Ruffian's interest, Big explains that it's not very good bait, but if his new friend wants it, he can have it all the same, with this simple gesture of kindness touching Knuckles, and deeply endearing him to Big in this timeline, as it reminds him of the times his brothers have gone that extra mile for him. For that matter, maybe he was a little hard on Sonic last night, since he wasn't hurting anyone even if he was being a pain in the butt, though that's something they can discuss when they all meet up later. For now, he needs to focus on reuniting Big with his precious pal, heading deeper into the jungle in the hopes of tracking down this mystery Batnik. Knuckles and Big ironically stumble upon the mystic ruins, now that they're not looking for them, with Knux in particular being awed by the sight. However, this is nothing to the shock he experiences when an orb of red light flies into him. Like with Tails, he is briefly blinded, though when his vision returns, he can hardly believe what he is witnessing. The forest all around the ruins has been entirely cleared away, while the central temple looks practically new, though both of these sites are nothing to the one standing at the altar, since as impossible impossible as it may seem, he's certain that's another echidna. Face splitting into a sort of smile only Sonic and Tails have been able to coax from before, Knuckles runs up the great stairs and towards what he now recognizes as the original altar of the Master Emerald. Though as he draws near enough to hear what the other echidna is saying, his blood runs cold. It seems their father Pachacamac intends to invade this place and steal its treasure. No, that can't be right. He knows the legend of Chief Pachacamac. He was a noble hero and a wise leader, not some plundering warlord vainly saber-rattling and misusing his strength. Though by the same token, he cannot deny the genuineness with which this echidna woman speaks. And as he knows well who a person is and who are they perceived to be, especially by those who don't know them, are very different things. So if Pachacamac's own daughter has deemed him a thief, then perhaps that is who we should believe. This is a lot for Knuckles to take in, as it would mean the noble legacy of his people is a lie, as is the image of hero selflessly guarding the Master Emerald around which he has built his entire life. Even the duty and bond he therefore shared with his brothers in arms would be a farce. Perhaps he is not the guardian he believed himself to be. Maybe he's just the next in a long line of thieves hoarding their stolen treasure. So distressing is this thought that Knuckles does not even realize he has been returned to the present day, with it taking Big to point out that they are now on top of a plateau, and he sees something strange in the distance. Snapping out of his funk for the moment, Knux has no difficulty seeing what Big is talking about. A giant airship rising up from a massive tower, bearing the symbol of the Eggman Empire. Figuring this must be where the robot in question and Froggy are, the echidna tells Big to meet him on board. Then with a leap, he begins gliding down onto the egg carrier, while Big uses his fishing line to hoist himself on board as it passes overhead, so that soon the two friends are safely stowed away. Or perhaps, unsafely would be more accurate, as now they're in the lair of the enemy, meaning all it will take is one wrong move, and they'll be in a worse state than Froggy. Meanwhile, back with Sonic, he and Amy have just been made aware of the egg carrier's presence too, as following what Amy mistakenly believes is an unforecasted eclipse, the pair are greeted to the sight of the great aircraft soaring overhead. However, this is not all they receive, as suddenly, a blue Flicky wearing a locket comes tumbling down from the egg carrier, and right to Sonic himself, with the blue blur urging the little guy to watch where he's flying as he catches him. A little more compassionately, Amy retorts that Sonic shouldn't be so mean to Birdie, since he's clearly scared, the other hedgehog reluctantly accepting this, as he asks what they should do with him. Flashing a grin, Amy replies that for now, they need to be his bodyguards and keep him safe from Eggman, since from the logo on the side of the egg carrier, he's backing up to his same old nasty tricks. Smirking that she didn't need Chaos Divination to tell him that one, Sonic agrees, since he's not going to turn his back on someone in need, though he suggests taking it a step further from just watching over the Flicky. They need to take the fight to Eggman, and see what he's up to before stopping it, which means getting on board that airship. Nodding that she thinks she knows just the way to do that, Amy gestures for Sonic to follow her, though as they turn and prepare to tip off, a most unwelcome sight fills their eyes. A new model battening that looks like a giant floating hazardous waste barrel, with giant mechanical hands fit for grabbing or delivering a mean uppercut that put Knux to shame. While on the main timeline, this filled Amy with fear, causing her to run and hide. Here, with her warrior training from Knuckles and Sonic by her side, she has no intention of fleeing or being helpless ever again. And so turning to the blue blur, she asks if he's ready to kick some robot butt, smirking that she just has to point it out and he'll kick it. Sonic gets into a runner stance, and then as one, the two hedgehogs launch their assaults on E100-0. Not that they ever learn his name, as with how much further ahead they are in this timeline, not to mention the fact they are fighting as a pair, this is less a battle and more curb stomping, somewhat literally, as Sonic's boost-powered spin dashes are quickly able to knock Zero off his thrusters and onto the ground, where Amy promptly and ruthlessly hammers him into tiny pieces of flattened scrap on the sidewalk, courtesy of her Pico Hammer, and her even more monstrous strength thanks to her training of this timeline. Nonetheless, it is a good workout, with both heroes invigorated afterwards, and figuring that they definitely don't have time to lose if Eggman's already sending batnings after Birdie, the pair and their avian companion begin taking off for Amy's suggested destination of Red Mountain. Around this time, Tails also finds himself becoming aware of the egg carrier, though in his case, because he has been teleported aboard alongside the red robot by whatever force just pulled him into the past. Due to some quick thinking, the wily fox is able to hide when he realizes that he is not only in a room with the red batnik, but also 3 others of the same make and model, sporting different colors. Evidently, each of them has a frog in their hands, and figuring this is something worth investigating rather than going off half-cocked, Tails bides his time and watches. This is almost immediately proved a wise decision, as a few moments later, Eggman himself, now sporting a spiffy new neo-futurist jacket, comes marching in, as he demands his creations show him what they found. As one, the robots each present their frogs, with most being met with contempt and abuse, until finally, the doc reaches the red one, who he calls Gamma. Here at last, the mustachioed madman smiles, as he states that this is the one, before ordering Gamma to head down to the robotics lab to receive some well-earned upgrades, while the rest of them who he deems worthless machines are banished, being teleported off in a flash of light. This at least explains why Gamma had kidnapped that frog, though the question still stands of what Eggman wants with it. Unfortunately, the doctor's fondest for monologuing does not go that far, as with the tailed frog now in hand, he climbs aboard his eggmobile and begins flying upwards towards the deck. Seeing no way to follow him without being immediately spotted, Tails decides to shadow Gamma instead, as perhaps that will lead him to a side elevator, or at least some stairs he can sneak up. As a result, he begins heading down deeper into the bowels of the ship, all the while taking care not to be seen. Fortunately, due to Eggman automating so much of the vessel, there are very few bots who might spot him, and those who do are nowhere near as sophisticated as Metal Tails, who he was able to successfully avoid for a year. Subsequently, he has no issue reaching the robotics lab where he spots Gamma staring up at an automated repair bay where a black model from the same series as him is being torn apart and forcibly altered. Though neither bot has an expression, after spending time with Tails' doll, the real Tails feels as though he can see what these two machines are feeling. The black one is in immense pain at this forced modification, while Gamma is struck by a mix of horror and sorrow. Taking this to mean that the red bot has at least some degree of empathy and self-awareness, the yellow fox decides to do something a little risky as he steps out of his hiding spot and attempts to confront Gamma, asking if the black bot is his friend. In his modulated voice, Gamma replies that Dr. Eggman called Beta his older brother, but Tails smiling that he has two of those too, and he'd be upset if someone was hurting them, so would he like some help rescuing Beta? Clearly not understanding. Gamma states that Beta was deemed obsolete by their maker, so he must be upgraded. That is logical, and anything he may be feeling to the contrary is illogical, and likely a programming bug. Chuckling a little, Tails retorts that he doesn't think so. He thinks it's Gamma's individuality coming out, since he once had a friend who was also deemed defective by the doc, but who helped him to defeat him and his more functional robots. At these words, something flashes in Gamma's green eyes, almost like wonderment at the idea that an Eggman robot could not only defy its programming, but overcome its maker. And seeing this, Tails explains that he'd actually fought with a whole army of Eggman creations who defied their programming. This new piece of data is at last enough to help Gamma settle the uncertainty he was feeling, and so looking to Tails, he states that affirmative, he wishes to rescue Beta. He wishes to rescue all his E-Series brothers. Smile broadening, Tails cheers that this is spoken like a true little brother, and so flying up, he begins pressing several buttons on the repair bay, causing it to shut down and release Beta, who is halfway between his original form and Beta Mark II. Hovering down, the Black E-Series gives Gamma what appears to be a grateful look. Then, having accepted the new mission parameters his red counterpart mentioned, he begins charting the most optimal path towards the nearest of his brethren, before taking off with Tails and Gamma in hot pursuit. However, as it turns out, this path will lead to a convergence of fates, as never one to be left behind. Sonic, with Amy by his side, has just made his way onto the egg carrier too, having raced up Red Mountain and used his boost at the last second to leap onto the deck, while compared to his brother's more stealthy entrances, Knuckles and Big pretty much burst their way onto the scene. This draws the attention and ire of all the badniks in view, with the resultant commotion as the Hedgehogs dispatch them, drawing Knuckles, Tails, Big, Gamma, and Beta into one big gaggle. At the sight of each other, Team Guardian all let out cheers as they run to embrace each other and introduce their respective companions, or at least they would, if not for two other uninvited guests, Eggman and his water monster, who is mutated into something far larger since Sonic saw it last. Were this not bad enough, it is here the Doctor reveals his interest in both Froggy and Birdie, as the former has swallowed a piece of the monster who Eggman reveals is Chaos, along with a Chaos Emerald, while the latter has a Chaos Emerald in its locket. By seizing these and allowing Chaos to absorb them, the mad scientist is able to transform the ancient Guardian Spirit into his penultimate transformation, Chaos 6, who he gleefully sicks on the heroes, laughing all the while that once he has destroyed them, he will do the same to Station Square, so that he may rebuild his grand Eggman land upon its ashes. Refusing to let this happen, Team Guardian and their allies all rush in to begin their battle, though even united, they are not on the same level as a primordial Guardian Spirit, with Chaos 6 using its long prehensile tail to slash and whip at them, often splitting them up or intercepting their attacks. Against such power, it seems that any chance of victory is impossible, and perhaps it would be if not for Tails' trip to the past with Gamma, as due to having a great understanding of what Chaos is, Tails is able to devise a strategy to beat him, though it will take everyone pulling together. Naturally, his brothers are with him, as are their friends, with the Fox instructing Amy, Big, Gamma, and Beta to all hold the ancient deity off for a bit, while he, Sonic, and Knuckles pull off their big play. Eager to help, the elder two brothers ask what Tails needs of them, with the yellow youth explaining that he's going to try and go hyper, though since he's never done it before, he wants the two of them to share their energy with him, while giving him their Master Emerald shards, in a testament to the strength of their brotherly bond. Neither Sonic nor Knucks object, patting their little bro on the back and handing him the gem fragments, with assurance that he can do this. Truthfully, Tails wishes he felt as sure in himself as they feel in him, though recognizing that everyone is counting on him, he calls forth everything he has, leaving nothing in the tank, as he flies towards the distracted Chaos. At once, lightning begins crackling around the Fox, causing his fur to glow and light, standing on end, as he then feels the raw power of a rolling storm course through every molecule of his body, so that when he lands his brilliant strike, it causes Chaos to spark and explode, seemingly evaporating under the force of his raw power, multiplied by Sonic and Knuckles. In his wake, the only thing left are the 6 Chaos Emeralds and Froggy, the latter of whom Big picks up and hugs. However, it seems now is hardly the time for celebration, since it seems Chaos wasn't the only thing rocked by Tails' attack, as the egg carrier itself lurches forward and falls into a potentially lethal nosedive. But that's where we'll be leaving this story off for right now.